United States Central Command has confirmed a significant and deeply concerning development in the expanding Middle East conflict. 3 American F-15 Strike Eagle fighter jets were shot down by friendly fire from Kuwaiti forces during active combat operations in the region. All 6 crew members aboard those aircraft ejected successfully and have been recovered by the United States military. All 6 are confirmed to be in stable condition. Video geolocated by journalists appears to show one of the F-15 aircraft falling from the sky with a pilot parachuting to safety, and additional footage appears to document pilots on the ground following successful ejections. Central Command has stated that Kuwaiti air defenses mistakenly engaged and destroyed the 3 jets during a period of active combat that included simultaneous attacks from Iranian aircraft, ballistic missiles, and drone systems. The cause of the incident remains under formal investigation.
The circumstances surrounding the friendly fire incident provide important context for understanding how it occurred. The air campaign that preceded this incident was one of extraordinary scale and operational complexity. More than 1,000 sorties were flown over the course of the weekend across a network of assets that included the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group operating in the Gulf region, the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group positioned in the Mediterranean, every American airbase across the Middle East theater, and almost certainly Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from submarines operating in the area. Coordinating that volume of simultaneous air activity involving multiple nations, multiple weapons platforms, and multiple threat vectors in an environment where Iranian aircraft, ballistic missiles, and drones were simultaneously inbound across the same airspace created conditions in which the Kuwaiti air defense batteries appear to have misidentified the American F-15s as hostile targets and engaged them accordingly. Military analysts with direct knowledge of air campaign management have noted that while the incident is deeply regrettable, the sheer complexity of what was being coordinated makes some form of confusion within the operational picture an understandable, if tragic, outcome. What they have also noted is the broader performance context. The American and Israeli militaries executed an operation of unprecedented scale and complexity over the preceding days, without a single aircraft being shot down by hostile fire, which represents a remarkable operational achievement under the circumstances. The American military assets deployed in support of this campaign extend well beyond the F-15 Strike Eagles that were lost in the friendly fire incident. The force package includes MQ-9 Reaper remotely piloted aircraft, which carry Hellfire missiles and precision-guided bombs, and are capable of conducting sustained surveillance and strike operations over extended periods. The campaign has also involved B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, aircraft valued at more than $1 billion each, which typically fly missions from their home base at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri with a crew of 2, carrying out long-range strike operations before returning across the continental United States. The combination of carrier-based tactical aircraft, land-based fighters, long-range stealth bombers, submarine-launched cruise missiles, and remotely piloted strike aircraft represents the full integration of American air power capability being brought to bear in this conflict. Reporting from the Iranian border in eastern Iraq provides a ground-level view of how the conflict is manifesting at one of the region's most critical crossing points. As of the time of this report, limited traffic movement is being permitted at the border crossing, with Iranian trucks and Iranian nationals being allowed to cross back into Iran, and Iraqis who had been on the Iranian side being permitted to return. The situation at the border has been intermittent, with closures and reopenings occurring in response to the security conditions of the moment. One of the most striking observations from correspondents stationed at the crossing was the direct overhead passage of an Iranian Shahed drone, visible to journalists and their camera crews on the ground, illustrating with unmistakable immediacy that active Iranian drone activity is occurring in the immediate vicinity of the Iraqi-Iranian border region. An Iranian truck driver interviewed at the crossing expressed fear about conditions inside Iran, but stated his determination to return home as quickly as possible to reach his family. a human detail that captures the anxiety affecting civilian populations on both sides of the conflict. The situation in Dubai and across the United Arab Emirates represents one of the most dramatic examples of how the Iranian retaliatory campaign is affecting countries that are not direct military participants in the conflict, but that host American military assets and have become targets of Iranian strikes as a consequence. Correspondents reporting from Dubai describe a city that has been transformed from one of the most active and internationally connected urban environments in the world into something resembling a ghost town. The streets that are normally filled with traffic and commercial activity have emptied. Schools have shifted to virtual instruction. Many retail establishments have closed their doors. Residents and expatriates are following shelter-in-place guidance with serious intent, and large numbers of people are actively seeking ways to depart the country, with international travelers in hotels observed searching for available flight options. The scale of Iranian military activity directed at the UAE is substantial and has been documented in detail by the Emirati Ministry of Defense. According to figures covering the period through Sunday, with confirmed additional activity having occurred since that reporting, Iran has directed 165 ballistic missiles, 2 cruise missiles, and 541 drones toward the United Arab Emirates. The combined defensive response has successfully intercepted more than 92% of those incoming weapons, a performance that reflects the sophisticated and layered air defense architecture the UAE has constructed in cooperation with the United States over recent years. The interception rate, while impressive, does not eliminate the sustained psychological impact on a civilian population living under conditions of repeated warning sirens and the visible and audible evidence of defensive intercepts occurring overhead. Correspondents on the ground in Dubai report hearing interceptions during the morning hours, with the sound of fighter jets in the air continuing without pause, indicating that the Iranian assault against Gulf targets has not diminished in intensity. The geographic reach of Iranian strikes extends well beyond the UAE and into the broader Gulf region. Since the conflict began, Qatar has absorbed approximately 65 Iranian missiles. Bahrain has received approximately 35. Explosions have been reported in eastern Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. Oman, which had been attempting to facilitate a last-minute diplomatic resolution before the military campaign began, has also been struck. The breadth of this targeting pattern demonstrates that Iran is not limiting its retaliatory campaign to the countries most directly involved in hosting American military strike operations, but is extending it across the full range of Gulf states that maintain American military relationships, treating all of them as legitimate targets for retaliation. The situation in Cyprus has introduced British military assets directly into the zone of conflict, creating significant political complications for a government that has been working to maintain a carefully defined position regarding the extent of its involvement. A British Royal Air Force base in Cyprus has now been struck twice within a short time frame. During the first incident, which occurred overnight, a drone made direct contact with the base, causing minimal physical damage and producing no casualties. Following that strike, British officials announced plans to evacuate family members from the base. The following morning, 2 additional drones fired toward the same base were intercepted before reaching their target, raising the disturbing question of whether evacuation efforts were underway simultaneously with continued incoming drone activity against the same installation. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been navigating a position that contains inherent tension. He has stated publicly that Britain will not participate in offensive strikes against Iran, explicitly drawing on the lessons of British involvement in Iraq and expressing the government's intention not to repeat that experience. He has referenced that historical comparison directly in public statements to explain the limits of British military engagement. At the same time, he has confirmed that British bases will be made available for use by American military forces in support of their operations, a decision that has generated significant political controversy within the United Kingdom about the appropriate level of British involvement and the risks that flow from being associated with American operations, even without direct offensive participation. The strikes against the British base in Cyprus illustrate precisely the dilemma that Prime Minister Starmer's position creates. Iran has demonstrated that it is willing to target British military facilities regardless of whether Britain is conducting offensive operations, treating the provision of basing support to the United States as sufficient justification for direct targeting. British officials have issued warnings that British personnel and citizens may be subject to Iranian strikes, even if the government maintains its stated posture of not participating in offensive military action against Iran. Britain has separately confirmed that it shot down one drone in what officials characterized as a purely defensive action, a distinction the government has been careful to maintain publicly, even as the line between defensive and offensive engagement becomes increasingly difficult to define in practice when active combat is occurring in the immediate vicinity of British assets. The country finds itself in a position it did not seek and cannot easily exit, drawn into the conflict's risk envelope by its alliance commitments and basing arrangements, even while attempting to limit the formal scope of its military participation. The picture that emerges from these developments across multiple locations simultaneously is one of a conflict that has expanded well beyond the initial parameters of the American and Israeli strike campaign against Iranian leadership and nuclear infrastructure. The friendly fire loss of 3 F-15s over Kuwait, the transformation of Dubai from a global commercial hub into a shelter-in-place city absorbing hundreds of Iranian missiles and drones, the repeated strikes against British military facilities in Cyprus, the active drone activity visible from the Iraqi-Iranian border, and the extension of Iranian strikes to Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE collectively describe a regional conflict of a scope and geographic distribution that was not the intended outcome of the initial military operation. The decisions made in the coming hours and days, both military and diplomatic, will determine whether the conflict finds a path toward de-escalation or continues to expand into territory with consequences that no party has fully planned for.